Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Care Annual Conference. Today's session, where we have three very interesting presentations from Scotland, Taiwan, and Slovenia. My name is Agnes Turnpenny. I'm a researcher at the University of Kent. I'm going to be chairing the session, and I'm also going to be the discussant after the presentation. So let's just start with the presentations. First, we have Dr. Mandy Cook, who's going to talk about a pilot project of woodland activities for people living with dementia. So Mandy, please take the floor.
Thank you, Agnes. This paper focuses on people with dementia living at home and shows the results of a pilot programme of activities based in an urban woodland setting designed specifically for people living with dementia. The pilot programme was used to investigate how participation in the programme can contribute to positive mental well-being and broader community belonging. This was part of my PhD research at the University of Dundee in Scotland. Next slide, please. The delivery of care and support available for people living with dementia is changing, with a growing move towards supporting people with dementia and carers to live in the community for as long as possible. Inclusion of people living with dementia in decisions about their own care, and an increased focus on the importance of asserting and upholding human rights. Researchers recognise an increasingly awareness of the role the outdoor environment plays in the health, independence, well-being and cognitive function of people living with dementia. But a review by Orr et al. Recognised that the majority of people with dementia are living in the community, yet outdoor space has rarely been considered in a dementia setting, with the result that people living with dementia can sometimes feel out of place in outdoor space. Despite the UK government's ambition that everyone should have fair access to a good quality natural environment, the simple act of getting out into nature and experiencing the benefits this brings can often feel or be out of reach for many people with dementia. Next slide, please. The pilot woodland activity programme was developed from the results of interviews with participants and facilitators of 5 existing woodland activity projects taking place in Scotland, which were specifically run for people living with dementia. The results were then used to design a 10-week pilot programme. 5 male participants with dementia aged between 52 and 83 took part in the programme, along with 1 family carer. Alzheimer's Scotland were pivotal in helping to support and promote the woodland programme through their network of community-based dementia link and support workers. Next slide, please. To help inform the development and delivery of the pilot woodland activity programme, I used this ecological model of well-being. From this perspective, a person's activities and well-being are seen to be influenced by a number of factors, such as attributes of person and attributes of context and place. Everyday activities can be seen to be either facilitated or constrained by these personal and contextual factors. Next, please. The 10-week programme was made up of 6 types of activities: physical, conservation, craft, using natural materials, environmental art. The programme ended with an award ceremony where friends and family were invited to come along. All the activities were flexible and adapted by the rangers to ensure everyone could take part if they wanted to. If they didn't want to take part, that was equally okay. And some weeks, some participants were just happy to sit and watch others taking part in the activities. Next slide, please. The findings from the pilot woodland activity programme suggest that the beneficial impacts of urban woodland activities for people living with dementia fall into the 5 key themes and sub-themes shown here. The key themes and sub-themes are all interlinked. A successful woodland activity programme should deliver on all key themes and also the sub-themes in varying degrees, depending on the individuals taking part. In this way, the woodland activity programme will promote overall positive mental well-being. So just to go through these key themes in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So, supporting valued activities was the main outcome for all participants. The findings support research by Finney et al., who showed that through doing, people with dementia find their lives to be meaningful. Participants in the Woodland programme took part in a variety of activities. Through their involvement in these activities, they found meaning in the pleasure and enjoyment they experienced, in their feeling that they still belonged in the world, and in their ability to retain a sense of autonomy and identity. Next slide, please. Encouraging social interaction was also an important outcome. For all participants, the connection to the rangers and the relationship which developed as a result was seen as a key outcome for the programme. Throughout the programme, participants were given the opportunity to demonstrate skills and knowledge which allowed the relationship with the rangers to grow to be more of a partnership between workers. Next slide, please. Connection to nature was about the value of a meaningful, purposeful sensory experience. Participants spoke about the rain, the crackling campfire, woodland smells and birdsong. The woodland environment also promoted a strong connection to the changing seasons and stimulated memory and reminiscence. The nature photography activity allowed one participant to express his multi-sensory experience of the woodland. Stopping to take a photograph focused his attention on his surroundings. He was engaged and interested, and it stimulated conversation. Next slide, please. An enhanced feeling of mental well-being was also promoted through participation in the programme. The programme provided a sense of escapism and a return to nature that was a welcome release from day-to-day activities. An enhanced feeling of mental well-being was an important outcome for one participant, which resulted in memory retention, as can be seen here in the quote. Sensory stimulation in the form of smell, sound, cold, warmth, colours, objects, and another person's presence can trigger the process of remembering. Reminiscence is a meaningful dimension in a person with dementia's life, as social and externally focused activities become more restricted and life is increasingly lived indoors. Next slide, please. An increased sense of empowerment and control was the final outcome, which positively impacted on participants' mental well-being and quality of life. Self-confidence in particular featured strongly under this theme. For one participant, taking part in the pilot woodland activity programme gave him confidence in himself and his own abilities by reminding him about what he had been doing previously, showing him that he could still do things and giving him the confidence to keep on doing them. Next slide, please. So to conclude, the desire of people living with dementia to engage in personally meaningful activities, to be connected with self, with others, and with the environment has been identified as important themes in this study. There is a need to hold on to the principle of person-centred care, which is about stimulating, challenging, and helping people reach their full potential so new experiences of outside can be much appreciated and valued. The Woodland Activity Programme can be seen as an alternative intervention which will enhance the services currently available for people living with dementia, especially those living with younger onset dementia where service provision is currently lacking. People living with dementia do not always want to be prisoners of their past. This was reiterated by a participant of the Woodland programme who enjoyed talking about his childhood memories of the woodland, but he also enjoyed planting trees and was looking forward to seeing them grow. Next slide, please. Up until the current situation with coronavirus, the rangers at Forestry and Land Scotland have continued to run the woodland activity programmes, which we first developed as part of my PhD research. In September 2019, we were very pleased to have won the Best Dementia Friendly Community Initiative at the Scottish Dementia Awards. Next slide, please. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. And if you'd like any further information, please do email me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mandy. This was really, really interesting. I'm sure we are going to have lots of questions after all the other presentations. But now we move over to Taiwan, and I would like to welcome our next presenter, who's Professor Yueh-Ching Chou from the National Yang-Ming University in Taiwan. Professor Chou has a PhD in social work. Her main research interests focus on supporting individuals with an intellectual disability living in the community, including their parents and carers, and the reconciliation between paid work and unpaid caring among mothers of children with intellectual disabilities. Her research work has been linked with her involvement in the disability movement and in close cooperation with organizations of parents and practitioners in Taiwan. And today she's going to talk about the experiences of old widows living with and without an aging offspring with intellectual disabilities. So please take the floor.
Okay, thanks. Okay, for the introduction, older people aged 80 or older have been categorized as the oldest older population, and recently long-term care and gerontology researchers have started paying attention to this group of older people. And this group of older people are mostly widow women, and some of them are still the carers over their aging sons and daughters with learning disability. And many studies have focused on their parents or mothers with young children with LD, and also compare these parents and mothers with those parents and mothers with young children without a disability. But however, such studies and comparison rarely pay attention to the oldest old widows living with and without aging offspring with LD. Next. Thanks. And the oldest older widows are seen as care recipients by the long-term care researchers. But however, some oldest older and widows mothers with offspring with LD are still the carers of their disabled children. And regarding the future care plan among these older parents, usually focus on their disabled children, not focus on their older mothers. So the term double new population means older parents and older disabled children. And some studies indicate that for this double new population have become mutual carers and aging in place by long-term care, gerontology, housing research have just focused on general older people instead of this group of older widows. And in previous findings also indicate that majority of these older widows still prefer aging in place. And the research also revealed that social support, in particular, the relationship with children, are very important for older widows. Next, please. And Clapham developed housing pathways which cover 4 domains: personal control, identity and self-esteem, social support, and inequality. Next, please. And 2 research questions of this study. First one, What are other profiles of current and future living arrangements, aging in place or relocation among all these old widows who have no offspring with LD? And second, what are reasons do all these old widows having no son or daughters with LD give for considering aging in place or moving? And how is such a decision shaped by 4 domains of housing pathways: personal control, identity and self-esteem, social support, and inequality in individual and social contexts? Next, please. And this study utilized qualitative approach and conducted an in-depth interview between 2016 and 2017, and the participants were recruited based on purposive sampling and snowballing, and the data was analyzed with thematic analysis approach. Next. This figure is to show how the participants were defined in this study. In total, 60 older parents who cohabited with offspring with LD in the community completed the interviews, and 17 of them aged between 80 and 95 became the participant of this study. And 42 general older people older than 65 were interviewed, and 7 of them aged between 82 and 88 were included in this study as a comparative group. Next, please. And the findings regarding the types of residents among all these old widows' mothers include living with a son and or daughter with LD alone, or 2 generations or 3 generations living together. And among general all these old widows, 5 different kind of residential types, such as living alone or living with a migrant care worker alone, or moving to live with a sister, or moving to live with a married daughter, or living with 3 generations. Next, please. And regarding these widows' mothers' future residential plan, none of them choose to move. They would not move to a nursing home themselves, as well as they would not let their disabled children move to a residential setting, and they had already lived with their disabled children for 4 or 6 decades. So for those living with disabled children alone, also choose not to move to live with other children who were without a disability. And among general old widows, nursing home was not an option, and also said that their children would not let them to do so, and because their children were filial piety to them. And both all these old widows would age in place and trust their children would not let them move to nursing home. Next. And 4 domains relation to residential choices. First, personal control. We found that the personal control was shaped by their housing ownership and financial independence and getting used to. For example, Wei, aged 81 and living with a son with LD alone in a 2-level townhouse at Charlotte. I like to live here. People here are friendly. Here in the countryside, it's very convenient. We plant vegetables for ourselves, and we cook 1 meal for eating 3 times a day. And when I was young, I had worked so hard, and now I just want to enjoy my life. And now every month I have a farmer's pension, and also my children and got a disability allowance, and we have some income from rent. And living here, the house is big, and I'm used to. Next, please. And we also found that the widow's self-esteem and self-identity was shaped by the housing ownership and also financial independence and the relationship with children. And E, age 82, living with the son with LD alone in rural area, and felt proud of higher esteem when she shared that her children were filial to her, and also gave her money and answered she was very happy. And for the general audience, older widows' self-esteem or self-identity was also influenced by children achievement. Lin, age 88, one son and two daughters, living alone in a city, was very proud of her family background. She said, "My son is working as a professor in X city, and my two daughters all study in the US, and my younger daughter got an American doctor degree." Next, thanks. And this study also found that the housing ownership came with the belongingness of the community, and the community identity was in relation to the place where they were born or where they live since they married, or where their relatives live around, and the neighbors knew each other for many years. So for the widow mothers, the community also, the identity also related to the living place where their disabled children would be accepted and go around. Next, please. And for formal social support was almost non-existent for both. Relationship with children was very important instrumentally and emotionally for these old widows. However, their support network with neighbors and relatives was shrunk. And for the disabled son and daughter might become a companion for or mutual carer of oldest older widow mothers. And some of the oldest older widows might be companioned by a live-in migrant carers. Next, please. And in terms of inequality, these oldest old widows' financial capital includes the level of pension, saving, or money given by their children. And children filial piety could be their social and financial capitals. And while the widow mothers were frail, if their family and children financial condition was good, and the frail mothers might be cared by a living migrant care worker, otherwise would be cared by their children. Next, please. In this study, we also found that the family value played an important factor in relation to these oldest old widows who chose to age in place. For example, the relationship with children was related to whether moving to a nursing home or not. And even they also gave such a choice to children. They believed that their children would have filial piety to them and took care of them in old age. So they counted on children, but not counted on formal social system. We also found that the gender was a matter among these oldest old widows. For example, the housing ownership was only transferred to son or grandson, but not to the daughter. Even the daughter was the carer. Next. Next, please. Yeah. And to conclude, we compare these oldest old widows having or having no disabled children living with. We found that both of them chose to age in place. Both of them personal control and self-esteem were shaped by ownership of the housing and financial independence and the relationship with the children and getting used to the place or to the lifestyle. And the housing ownership was very important for these widows, as it was related to not only personal control, self-esteem, but also the community identity. And the social support for these widows meant support from children, including financial and care support. And in terms of the impact of cultural context, nursing home was not an option, and the children filial piety was highly expected. So we found that the decision in moving or not moving for these oldest old widows was shaped by culture rather than their individual characteristics, such as their age, health, care needs, or where they live. Next, please. So the differences of the oldest old widows mothers and the oldest old widows was the former ones were companioned by their disabled children, and the later ones might be companioned by the live-in migrant care worker. Okay, thank you. This is my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yueh-Ching. This was fascinating. So now we move to Anna Ramovš, who's going to present her joint work with Ajda Svetelšek. Anna is a medical doctor at the University Medical Center in Ljubljana, Slovenia, and she's also a researcher in the fields of healthy aging, preventative medicine, digital solutions, public health, geriatrics, and ethics at the Anton Trstenjak Institute. She is supporting the coordination of Intergenerational Programs Network for Quality Aging in Slovenia. She delivers training to volunteers, carers, and older people who use services. And she has published extensively on in-group social learning and informal carers. And today she's going to talk about their evaluation of an in-group social learning method used for informal carers training. So thank you, Anna, please.
Thank you, Agnes, for this nice presentation. So as it was said, I come from Anton Trstenjak Institute of Gerontology and Intergenerational Relations. That's a national gerontological institute in Slovenia. And today I'm going to present you in-group social learning method, and more precisely its implementation and evaluation for informal carers training. This presentation is based on the a research evaluation study we did together with Jože Ramovš and Ajda Svetelšek. Jože Ramovš is head of our institute and also our senior researcher and author of the method, while Ajda is my co-researcher. So I would ask you for the first slide, please. I'd like to tell you first a little bit about the in-group social learning method itself. It was developed, as said, by Jože Ramovš, our head of institute, and at the beginning, the purpose of the method was to tackle loneliness and to encourage healthy and quality aging. As the name itself implies, it is a group method, and it's based on Bandura's social learning theory, on Frankel's logotherapy, and Moreno's teachings about group and group dynamics. In the heart of the method, it's sharing of the experiences, which is facilitated by the trained group leader, who encourages people to share their experiences on a specific topic. But here it's important that he encourages people in a way that mostly positive experiences are shared, or those negative that were already well processed, thus enabling people to learn from each other. This method builds on concrete abilities, experiences of the people. It gives them active role, and it incorporates the psychological, neurological, and andragogical knowledge we have on adult learning principles, on reinforcement of learning processes, on importance of experiences sharing, and also the gerontological knowledge on aging and anthropological knowledge on importance of intergenerational relations strengthening. Next slide, please. So, since we talked a little bit about the method itself, I'd like to tell you now how it became incorporated into informal carers training. It started around 25 years ago now, when we realized in Slovenia there are many formal carers, but they really lack support, knowledge, and skills. So we decided to develop a training model for them. And when we were searching for appropriate method to use for this training program, we realized that in-group social learning, with its ability to be very practical based on experience, it's something that would really suit this type of training. As it's common for us, we always combine development of methods, trainings with research. So we always evaluate what we do in order to improve. So after each training, people will hand it out evaluation papers together with some research questions. And what we did for the purpose of this study that I'm going to shortly present is we took these evaluation studies together with research questions from years 2010 to 2018. So it was 453 informal carers who participated in the trainings around Slovenia during that time. And then we did a qualitative and quantitative analysis of this questionnaire. Next slide, please. But before I present you the results themselves, I would like to tell you just a little bit about the training so you have an idea what we were evaluating. Training is composed of 10 meetings that last 2.5 hours, and they incorporate basic knowledge on caregiving, disease recognition, primary and secondary health prevention. People would learn practical skills on communication, basic nursing. They would learn practical exercise for back, pelvic floor. We would talk about care for oneself. We would talk about ethical, moral dilemmas, about dying, grieving, about possibilities of different forms of support, about spiritual needs. And then at the end, people would be encouraged to continue meeting in a club of family carers, so to stay in the same group, still connected. For each of these our sessions, there would be also a professional who is specialized in the topic that's of the meeting. So either that would be medical doctor or nurse if we are talking about dementia. It would be a community nurse when people learn basic nursing. And other professionals, we tend to invite them from the local environment, so it can be really practical for people living there. And then what a group leader does, he encourages people to share their experience on the subject, and also later on combines this knowledge with the theoretical knowledge that the professional has. Next slide, please. So now to the results. When we asked people in an open question, so that was qualitative one, about perceived personal benefits from training, we got answers that we divided into 4 subgroups. A lot of people reported that they gained knowledge and skills, which was of course our aim with the training. So they reported on getting nursing skills, that they better understand disease, dementia, old age, that they learn things on palliative care and so on. But as important for us was the second group. So 1/5 of people reported by themselves that they experienced, that they could share their own experience, that they comprehend experience on others, that they couldn't relate to them, that they recognize importance of a collective group experience. So meaning that the method we chose for this type of training seemed to be working, and it's important part of what people recognize. And then also very interestingly and importantly, because knowledge and skills is something that we often manage to get also through other methods, but building on inner strength, on self-confidence, self-confirmation, on social inclusion, on to strengthen this, to enable people to have stress relief, and such things are normally harder to be done. So this also came out as an important perceived personal benefit for the participants. And then of course there was a group of people answers that expressed general approval of the training. Next slide, please. That's actually emphasizing my last sentence, that participants generally evaluated training as very good or good. I will not stop here, so next slide, please. And more important for us, as I already said, is that participants felt that they could really express themselves during training. So the method, it's only able to work as long as people feel this is a safe space for them to share experiences, and in that way they can also gain this inner strength that I talked about previously, and also learn from each other. So here we can see that more than 98% of people had this experience in our training. Next slide, please. So to conclude and point out one more time the strong points that came out as part of this evaluation, it was that people, while looking at strengths of in-group social learning, people really, informal carers, participants of this training, really felt that the environment they were in was safe to share experiences, and were consequently able to gain knowledge and skills. With the help of group leaders, they were able to connect this to the theoretical knowledge that professionals had. And as importantly as that is, they were able to grow personally. So they could build on their human experience. They could, there was a personal growth that they reported, and we noticed in this evaluation study, and also their motivation, also consequently probably their ability and motivation for caregiver was developed as part of the training. And also important for carers, since it's a group method, it also helps to tackle isolation and give social support. And I would like to conclude with two practical sentences or examples. So if you would give me the next slide, please. Portraying this maybe harder part that each educational method has, so how to promote personal and social growth. One was one participant, she said at the end of the training, I will not be able to exchange my mother. I have to accept her as she is, and that's something I realized during this training. And that is something that really shows growth in a way that is very important for each interpersonal relationship, actually, and even more in while caring for elderly. It's a realization that there are things that we can change, we can work on, but there are also some things that we actually have to accept. And to come to this realization, it's something that we can, it really encourages us in our work if we can help with that a little bit. And then another sentence, please, I have another slide. Thank you. It's actually connected to the method, to the exercise we do on each of these training that is called lighting a lamp. And in practice, that looks like group leader would ask all the participants to share one good experience that they had with their caretaker. So something that was nice, warm for both of them, that lit a lamp for both of them, so to speak. That's why we use this phrase. And what one lady said at the end of the training was, I'm trying to light a lamp every day. I can manage in the morning, but it is harder in the evening. It's not a simple sentence. It recognizes the fact that caregiving, it's a difficult thing. It's not just about positive experiences, but what we learn from people here during the training, seeing them how hard it is at the beginning to share these good experiences and how much easier it gets during the training, is that it is important that we try, that they try to see also this positive aspect, because it becomes, caring in itself, it's still demanding, but this interpersonal part becomes easier if we are able also to notice these positive moments in the relationship, in the care itself, and that these parts also enable then for personal growth. Thank you, and with that, I would ask for the last slide. I would like to conclude with that. If you want to learn more about in-group social learning methods, or you're interested about anything else, you can always write me. And I included, since we cannot see each other personally, a picture from Slovenia from not long ago. So you're also welcome to visit us here anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, and I really hope we can take you up on your offer and go and see you in Slovenia, which is a beautiful country. So thank you. And I was just thinking about that during Mandy's presentation, that woodland activity program would be brilliant in Slovenia because you've got the most amazing mountains and forests there. So to Scotland.
I actually had the same thought about thinking about the woodland project. I'd really like to hear more because we are, I think, second country when it comes to forests in Europe. So it would be definitely something for us as well.
Yeah, thank you. So and then with this one, I think this is now a good moment to start our discussion. I was asked to be the discussant of this session, so I'm just going to kind of offer a few reflections on each presentation, and then perhaps kick off with some questions. And then I was also trying to find some common themes that perhaps we can reflect on together. So starting with Mandy's presentation about the pilot woodland activity program for people living with dementia in Scotland, I really like the idea of thinking about the outdoors as a dementia setting, which we don't really often hear about, and especially supporting people who live with dementia or developing dementia to have access to outdoor activities. And I think the events of the past year have really kind of highlighted the benefits of outdoor activities for everyone. But with the ongoing COVID restrictions, I think the outdoor might be the only setting where people will be allowed to mix and meet together and have joint activities. So I thought the presentation was really interesting, and the project, the activities seem really fascinating. I was also very impressed with your use of multiple methods to evaluate the pilot, especially the walk-along interviews and the photo voice methods that you used. And I would love to hear more about your experiences with this, especially using photo voice with people living with dementia. And finally, I would really like to hear about, you mentioned that Forestry Scotland continued with the program. So I'm just wondering if there are any plans for kind of upscaling it and perhaps a more kind of formal evaluation that looks at kind of the broader benefits or outcomes of the program. Yeah. And now moving on to Professor Chou's presentation, talking about oldest old widows living with their adult children with intellectual disabilities. I really liked how you highlighted the many positives of supporting and a family member with intellectual disabilities, and also the challenges. And I really found the kind of the highlight of or the expression of the reciprocity of the caring relationship in your presentation really, really important. So very often kind of looking after supporting an adult or a younger child with intellectual disability is seen as just as a one-way caring, but what you highlighted is how this is not just, this is a more complex situation, and it is really a reciprocal, dyadic caring relationship, and how mothers or parents and adult children support each other. Your presentation to me also really highlighted the need for kind of holistic approaches, and I kind of found they highlight that there was a lack of formal social support for this group of people, and I really would like to hear more about this, and perhaps we can think about how, as a society, and not just Taiwan, but I think most societies, how we could best support this small, but I think very important and also most likely growing group of carers and individuals with disabilities. And I also wondered if about the gender aspect of these issues. So if I understood it correctly, you had no fathers in the sample. Why was this? Would fathers be expected to continue living with their adult children with intellectual disabilities, or this was less common? And also if there would be any differences between families, so couples aging together as parents and their adult offspring with intellectual disability staying, would there be differences in family dynamics or dynamics? And also it would be, I don't know if you've done any research that explored the perspective of people with intellectual disabilities who live with aging parents, mothers, and what are their experiences, especially compared to their peers who live independently or maybe support from services. Yeah. And then finally, Anna's presentation presented some really interesting findings about support and in-group social learning for informal carers, people living with dementia. We know that the majority of older people are supported by informal carers. Just in the previous session, we talked about the cost of care for informal carers and how the different support available for informal carers. So this is a hugely important topic, and family members, informal carers in the community do the bulk of the caring, which is, if we put like a financial value to it, it would be huge. And we also know that very often these people have very limited access to formal services or support for themselves. Most people who just grow into their role of caring, and they are very much left to their own devices to figure out how to support their aging loved ones or loved ones who are developing dementia and so on. So they have very limited knowledge, and we also know that this then has a huge impact on their mental and physical health. We can very clearly see this in kind of indicators. So what you presented is a relatively simple intervention, in a sense that it is relatively cheap and easy to implement with a potentially very large impact. So I would really like to hear more about how carers can access this training. Is this a referral process? So say if somebody is diagnosed with dementia, will their carers get access to a training like this? And also, if you have looked at or thought about more kind of broader traditional kind of before after evaluations to kind of capture more the actual tangible impact on the mental health, perhaps even physical health, but mostly mental health of informal carers. So these were my comments on the presentations that I really enjoyed, and I was, so this was the open theme at the conference, which meant that these presentations were grouped together. And I was trying to think about something that linked the three together for me. And I thought, and some of you, especially Professor Chou mentioned in her presentation, this concept of aging in place and the importance. And by aging in place, I don't just mean physical place, people being allowed or able to stay in their family homes, but more how people are supported to live connected and meaningful life in their communities, surrounded by their families or loved ones or friends, family. So perhaps to me that this was the concept, and the three presentations all highlighted different aspects of that. So I don't know if now we can perhaps open the floor to discussion. Thank you. I don't know who would like to. I'm happy to repeat my questions, but yeah, just feel free to kind of reflect on anything. Thank you.
Do you want me to start?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just Agnes. You asked about the participatory action research that I use for the woodland programs, and that was seen as the best approach to evaluate and research the woodland programs. I used the walk-along interviews, not just in the programs, but also when I was developing the programs and looking at what other people were doing across Scotland. I went and did quite a few walk and talk interviews with various green space organisations, and we tended to meet on site, and it's just a better way to get a feeling, that sensory feeling of the woodlands and the value of the woodlands, and people could talk about the surroundings and what was important. And I did that as well with some people living with dementia who were part of the Scottish Dementia Working Group, who I met out in their favourite green spaces. And so I walked and talked with them about what was important to them, and that informed the woodland programmes. And the approach of using more creative methods within the programmes was really successful. It was just a way of using sight and sound and smell as well as talk to find out about what was important to people and what people valued. And particularly the photo voice was just a way of focusing on things that people enjoyed about the woodland. Wildflowers they saw, or a certain tree, a certain really old oak tree that was gnarled and twisted and had its own story to tell, was something I talked about with one participant. So it was a great way of focusing on the surroundings. I mean, it wasn't perfect for everybody. The digital cameras were quite fiddly, and some of the participants found them quite hard to use. So what I tried to do was maybe adapt that by me using the camera and taking the photos that the participants asked me to take. So that was a way around that. And with the environmental art, if we sent the participants out in pairs to pick up objects on the ground and things that they found interesting to make the artwork. And just doing that, collecting materials was really valuable, even if some participants might not have then been able to turn that into the actual art itself. So it was really successful, I think, way of evaluating the programme. And as far as doing future research, it would be wonderful to be able to scale it up. I know I've had so much interest in the woodland programmes from across the world, and We certainly have expanded them in Scotland, and it would be wonderful to find some funding to expand it further. I've had interest from New Zealand and from Slovenia as well. I did the Alzheimer Europe conference in Slovenia and had some really positive feedback. So I would love to do more work on expanding the woodland programs. It's something that people continually show interest in, which is wonderful. And I get emails every week about them. So yeah, if anybody's got any ideas for future funding or collaborative projects, that would be wonderful. Was that all the questions, Agnes?
Yeah, thank you. That's great, thank you. So who would like to go next?
Okay, I can continue. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for Angie's questions. Yeah, very good questions and very good feedback. I think first one I want to point out. Usually when we talk about carers, usually we mean carers of older people or carers of young children. Yeah, and this is also quite universal condition in Taiwan too, also or in literature so far. Yeah, when I kind of start pay attention to career and work reconciliation, this kind of thing, and then and this paper I want to point out is not only focus on mother carers, but particularly for those mothers already older than 80 years old. Yeah, and then actually nowadays, as you already know, yeah, because of their life expectancy longer. So just kind of for my beginning presentation, I mentioned about that. Actually, literature review also those kind of gerontology researcher also to not pay attention to, yeah, including long-term care researcher, pay attention to all these old people. But also based on the literature, actually this group of people usually female, okay, women, yeah, widows, already widows. And then in this study, I want to say also kind of this group of widows usually kind of from the healthcare or social care research, they identify this group of people are care recipient. Okay, but for these mothers, all these oldest mother, they are not. They are still the carers. Okay, but unfortunately, these researchers, I mean, gerontology or long-term care researchers, so far still didn't pay attention to this group of mothers. Okay, and in my study, I also found one father, and he was also older than 80. Okay, and I also live with the son with LD alone. But in my study, only one father, and another 17 were mother. So that's the reason, I gave up a lot of father. So unfortunately, so far I didn't compare whether father and mother, in particular in this old group. So far I didn't compare, and in terms of formal social support, I think actually in town we also have long-term care services and a long-term care scheme, and we also have healthcare insurance scheme and quite successful. But however, for this kind of special, for this group of widows or mothers, really so far we didn't provide any special services. Even for our long-term care services, only designed for general older people, but not really for older people or already kind of over 50 or 60 with LD, okay, or including their parents. And actually, in my study, I already pointed out that. But unfortunately, this is still kind of ignored by our policy. And then in my study, some mothers already decided, and then they did use home care services. But in Taiwan, you use social services. If you are not from the poor family, you still need to co-pay. Okay, so for usually for older people or for their children, okay, they would rather hire a live-in migrant care worker. And then migrant care worker in Taiwan is from the system in Australia, Italy. Because we need to apply from our government. And the government also need to go through the ADL or IADL assessment. And if it's kind of really disabled enough, and they will allow you to hire a live-in migrant care worker. And here in Taiwan, migrant care worker, they really live in with the family. Oh, so this is also quite special. But nowadays, you know, the government actually government doesn't support we hire migrant care worker because government want us to use long-term care services. But for the family, still feel the services from the formal system not good to use, inaccessible, and also the hours not so intensive enough. So the families, you know, hire live-in migrant care workers, the numbers are increasing gradually year and year. Yeah. So this is also the reality in Taiwan. And for the gender issue, maybe I didn't follow Angie's question so well, or maybe later you can explain to me. I think some disabled children still cared by father and mother together, but if only for those older, okay, father or mother older, 80 or 85, usually already become widows. Yeah, and in my study, I also analyzed those kind of older than 65 something, and cared by parents all together, and then parents. If parents live with, or parents with only single mother or single father, live with children with LD alone, I think it's quite different. You know, for example, you know, here, I just point out if kind of only mother or father live with son or daughter with ID, okay, LD alone, and then the relationship is really very, very, very special. If they live with 2 generations or 3 generations, it's not so special. Kind of, it become they really count on each other. Just like mother pointed out, you know, my son, you know, yeah, kind of also can, okay, accompany me to go to see the doctor, and my son also can help me to find out the some stuff I lost or something like that. Yeah, and then for this part, I mean, for those kind of couples, okay, live with children with disabilities, maybe not so obvious. You can see there is kind of mutual relationship, maybe not so clearly. Yeah. So I'm not sure whether I misunderstand your question. You know.
No,
Okay, thanks.
absolutely. That was my question. Yeah. Thank you. Anna?
Yes. To shortly answer your questions, if I remember correctly, you said how the participants access this training, how they get involved into it. The thing is, we are, as the Institute, we are Slovenian coordinator of age-friendly cities and communities. This is a global program under World Health Organization, so global network of age-friendly cities and communities. So we work with municipalities directly. And then as part of that, municipalities would offer people possibility of this training for the local population. That's one way how people can get this training. And often we also give them methodology how to get to the people that maybe need it the most. Because often people who are already active, they get also information already, but those who are not so inventive, maybe it's harder for them. So we encourage that local communities, municipalities work with community nurses, and then they see where is the need is bigger, and encourage people there to maybe participate in a training, which is for free. Then for them, it's for free. So normally it's either we finance it through the programs or municipalities would finance it. So that's mainly, but this year due to COVID, actually we tried few new aspects because the burden of care increased while it was impossible to hold trainings. So we actually started with online trainings, which has some drawbacks in this type of trainings because it's a lot on group and experiences, as I described previously. But the advantage was that actually some people that normally wouldn't participate, probably especially some of younger generations, were interested to join online training. And there was also possibility for people really from different parts of Slovenia. We normally do them quite diversely around Slovenia, but still we are limited with our resources. While this year it was possible, we offered few trainings and also made a new Facebook group when people actually could join for informal carers, and we carried 2 of such trainings because we thought that due to COVID, maybe some people, as you said previously, were pushed into this situation really overnight and they could benefit from some additional support and knowledge. And it turned out really well. We're just finishing the second training now, and even though people were at the beginning reluctant to share person experience through video conference, they really through time developed as a group. So it was a good experience all in all. And the second question you asked about the evaluation before and after. Well, I don't have a completely satisfactory answer here. That's something that we still want to do further. When we were writing the article for Frontiers, the research article, one of the things we were thinking was that it would be great to do with the same group to get more objective data from before and after to see not just perceived results are very important, but it's also good to have some objective measurements before and after. So we are planning to do that in the coming trainings. But another thing that we already did was in years 2010-11, we carried out a national survey on needs, possibilities, how was it titled again? Needs, potentials, and abilities and standpoints of Slovenian population aged 50 plus. It was a national representative study, so it covered all population aged 50 plus. And this enabled us, and 1/5 of them were family carers. So we could compare these people that didn't get any training and because the questions are quite similar to a degree, because as I said, we also include always research questions into our evaluation studies at the end of the training. So we could compare this, and what popped out, so to say, was that people after training reported feeling of loneliness was not so present, maybe also due to this bonding in a group and having heard similar experiences from others. And then perception of burden of care was lessly reported, while positive aspects were more emphasized. So that is something that gives us a little bit of comparison. It also gives us some confirmation of the way we want to go. But of course, it would be good to see more precisely how much impact the training itself has, and not because it's hard to distinguish how much is people who decide for training, how much is training. It would be also great if there are any other trainings that we could training methods that we could compare to, because as you said, training for informal carers is something that can be done with. It's a relatively simple thing that can have a huge impact, but so far we didn't find much data on different methods used. So it would be great if we can compare and also learn from each other in that aspect.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And yeah, it was really interesting. Originally I come from Hungary, and dementia is now a growing and huge issue, and informal carers have virtually no support, and most of them are at breaking point. So something like this could be kind of adapted and perhaps, yeah. Thank you. I don't know. So now maybe if you have any questions to each other or something to discuss further.
I thought I'd pick up the point you said about place and community. Just to say, recent research I've been looking at about connection to nature during the coronavirus pandemic has definitely emphasised the importance of connecting locally to green space and to woodlands and forests, and it's really come out as so important, having that access to local green space, for everybody during lockdown when they were only allowed out initially for one hour a day in the UK. So that is something I hope will be picked up once everybody gets through this, hopefully, and more can be done to promote the use of local green space, make local green space more accessible, and adapt it for people's needs and for people living with dementia.
Okay, I have one question.
Yeah.
Okay. It's okay?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Anna and Mandy's research all kind of relate to intervention, right? Yeah, you design intervention,
Yeah.
and one was for people living with dementia, and another one is kind of for carers of people living with dementia. Yeah. So my question is, because myself, I also done intervention research, but my intervention was for people with learning disabilities. Yeah, something like that, or for parents. Yeah. So my question is, for both of you, I'm just curious, are you going to have your intervention disseminated to other users or other country, other society, and which could be used? Yeah. Do you understand my
Yes.
question? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, for us, we built on this method for the last 25 years of in-group social learning, and then for the informal carers, we are carrying it out now for around 20 years or so. So more than 1,000 people already participated, and we do this yearly in local communities in Slovenia. So it's something that we still research and want to further develop. Of course, it's not something that's, for us, it's very important that things don't stand still, that they move together as we research, as we get feedback, as needs change a little bit, that we can also change and improve things. Another thing is we also use that working on international projects quite a lot. So we use this method so far in Croatia. Now there's a project going on for the Alpine space. So it's the Switzerland, France, Germany, Austria. So all the countries that have Alps, actually, Italy. And they are also part of the interventions they do. It's also this informal carers training, because as Agnes mentioned before, it's something that's very appealing to municipalities, to even to sometimes to work with companies, because it's something that's not so expensive. So it's for a reasonable amount of money, you get quite a huge impact. So that's why there is quite some interest in that. But we are limited. The thing with this, our method, is that if we want to carry it out, we think it's very important to have the group leaders going through the training, so that actually that this method is really carried out properly. So if you want to have group leader that's able to collect this, it seems very simple, but as I said, it builds on logotherapy and social learning methods. So you have to have some knowledge, because people would not just tell their good experience per se. And you have to know how to coordinate them, how to connect them with the theoretical knowledge. So people really don't get a feeling it's a chat, but it's experience sharing and enables this growth and everything. So that's maybe something that doesn't for dissemination, that's, so to speak, a tight neck where we really want to insist that people are trained before we disseminate that further. But we do that.
Thanks.
Yes, for me, we'd love to disseminate the programs further, and the idea of them was that the activities could be adapted to lots of different users, so they could be developed for other users. And what we had done, or what the rangers had done, was started to deliver the program for the local care home where they ran the program, and they were bringing the care home residents out every week with the care workers and delivering the program with them, and that was hugely successful, really enjoyed by the residents, and they didn't necessarily have, dementia, but yeah, that was really great. The only slightly negative thing about that was quite a few of the care home residents had more mobility issues, so some were in wheelchairs, some weren't able to move around quite as much, and combining that with the more active participants that might have had younger onset dementia, so in their early 50s, who wanted to be out and about doing more practical hands-on activities. It was quite difficult to combine the two. So ideally what we'd like to do was run, maybe everybody meet together, but then run separate activities. But it's all, unfortunately, like everything else, down to funding and being able to do that. But what the rangers at Forestry and Land Scotland were doing, they were going into the care homes and doing training for the care workers to try and encourage them to take the residents out themselves rather than rely on the rangers. So that's what they'd started to do before, unfortunately, coronavirus. So and that's something I'm really keen to pick up on, is more working with care homes and care home residents about enabling access, and beyond sort of the gardens, which I know a lot of research has been done about, but to trying to get residents out into the community, into the local green space, and beyond the confines of the care homes. So that was something we were looking at. Hopefully we can pick that up again.
Okay, thanks.
I would also like to ask a question. Actually, I'm not sure I will pronounce your name well. Yueh-Ching? When I was listening, thank you. When I was listening to your presentation, you just mentioned we are quite intervention orientated in our institute beside the research. So while listening to you, and you mentioned that you also did that, and listening to your research, I was thinking about this very, as you said, old widows living with children with intellectual disabilities. How do you think about, you mentioned migrant workers that would help them, and then also their children with disabilities provide some care. So it was interesting to listen to this way more complex situation than one would imagine at first. But what did you think about a solution, or what are how do people handle when this dependency deepens, when this provision of care is not enough, in when this child with a disability also has a limited of course, I guess depending on disability, but how much care he can provide at one point, and then when this old parent gets even more dependent or older, how do they normally? What are the possibilities? So how can they? What can they do? Is there a possibility for both of them to move into a retirement home or something like that, or how does that look? Or if you ever researched on that or had any ideas or thoughts, what would be a good solution for that?
Okay, so I answer. Okay, thank you for your question. Actually, in my study, kind of two mothers already. One mother that was already 95 years old, so she was really very ill, and then she was cared by a live-in migrant care worker, and then because she had three sons, and kind of sons' financial condition was not too. So the sons, okay, they hired two migrant care workers, one care for mother and one care for sister with intellectual disabilities. And then another mother, in her family, was not so rich. Actually, they were quite poor, okay? So they got a subsidy from the government. And then the mother was already in vegetable state. Okay, vegetable state, whether this is the term I use correct. Okay, and then she cared by her son, and her son just unmarried, and her son also didn't have a job, and only count on government subsidy. And her son need to take care of mother, and also care for brother with intellectual disabilities. So this is the case from poor family. And another one is kind of from, the son's financial condition was not too bad. So they could afford the cost of migrant care worker. So this is a condition. So now the government, if you hire a migrant care worker, you were not eligible to use social services. Actually, our government is quite mean from this perspective. Okay, and for those kind of, when I conduct my interview for those mothers, even they were old, but they were still okay. Okay, so they some of them really just live with son or daughter with intellectual disability alone. Only 2 persons live alone. But the mother just feel happy, So in my study, I also found that for those mothers actually live in very remote area, but they feel it's convenient, they got different perspective. And actually for our research, we say, live in rural area, that's quite inconvenient. But for the mothers say, it's very convenient, and then they love it and they enjoy life. Yeah, but they didn't use the services, but they say they still could survive. So I'm not sure do I answer your question. So when you kind of already become really frail or already disabled, and this is based on your family financial condition. Yeah, and the government actually only help those family already very poor. Yeah, yeah. But if you are kind of not so poor enough, maybe you would not use the social services. Yeah.
No, but for me it's really interesting this how important it seems to be, as you're explaining this aging in place, that they really have their own place, and how much it outweighs, and also these other positive aspects. Because what I tend to find a lot, especially when it comes to caregiving, is a lot of research on the burdens, but not so much about these positive aspects. And I think that is something that we can really, that's also something we try to do at the Institute, to look at what actually gives people strength, what keeps them motivated, what keep them
Yes.
stay there, as you so nicely explained, because I think that is something that we can actually build on. Negative is something that we try to tackle, but if we don't know what is existent potential, that we cannot build on it. And I really like that about actually both your researches is environment. Woods are something that we have and can build on, and also, as you explained, I think living in space and importance of it for people is something that. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure in your culture or in the culture in the UK, you know, living in nursing home, actually in Taiwan is still a stigma. So none of the mothers say they are going to move to nursing home. Yeah, but for sure, still some old people live in nursing home, but that's arranged by their children, not by themselves. Yeah, because in Taiwan, kind of you live in nursing, you feel you were very ashamed. That means you kind of abandoned by your children, you know. And yeah, this is still quite amazing, you know. Yeah.
Well,
So
in
how about in
Slovenia,
your
it's
country?
quite common. Yeah, in Slovenia, it's quite common for people to move to nursing home, though, as in the whole Europe, still around 80% or 75% of people would be at home due to different reasons. But it's also looking at the research data, more people would normally want to stay at home if possible, or live in less institutionalized nursing homes. So more that's a trend now, I think, around the Europe, but also in Slovenia, that they try to make them more home-like. But it's always, I mean, it's not the same. At least when you look at the research, also people mostly feel that way. It's also a little bit different in countryside and cities, but I couldn't say it's stigma here. So it's some people take it as a reality. They don't want in I think in our culture, European, maybe Western, it's more this feeling of independence and not to be a burden is very strong. So I think also that contributes a little bit. While I was in the East, I realized the family there is still very important, and this connectedness and this community feeling, while in Europe, this feeling of not being a burden, individualistic is sometimes stronger. So older people would go themselves into nursing homes in order not to burden their younger generation in a way, which is in a way also, I feel about it, it's also a little bit sad in a way. Because it is a voluntary, it's a choice, but it's also a little bit due to not feeling that you owe something, or you don't have a better option, not something that maybe you would want per se.
Okay. Yeah.
And also, I think, if I may jump in, the kind of this concept of living caregiver in the UK, this is now more and more common. Our research in the Sustainable Care Program focused on migrant living carers, so we're interested in this. In Central and Eastern Europe, I think this concept of having a living carer is still very, very new. So welcoming somebody or having somebody in your home that's not your family looking after you, that's really something families do struggle with, not just financially, that's one thing, but also kind of I don't know about Slovenia. And that's considering how many kind of Central and Eastern Europeans are themselves living carers in the West. So there's this thing very much so in kind of without formal services. But I think we are getting to the end of our session. Thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion. So just to close and wrap up, I'd like to offer each of you the opportunity perhaps just to reflect or just say what you take away from the session, what if you'd like. Yeah.
maybe I can start. So we turned around, so we go from the last to the first. For me, as I said, this aging in place that I heard from both my co-speakers was something that I could carry out of this session. So importance of that people have possibility to do that, and that we bring support closer, and also that they can connect to their environment, which also enables this aging in place. So in the case of the first presentation, to the woodland, to the nature, that's something that was interesting from me from this session. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, just give very simple feedback because I'm thinking, we 3 papers together, and I'm just thinking what's the connection between our 3 papers. I try to think about it, and I think maybe nowadays people use the term, right? People with cognition disability or something, and this is kind of means for people with living with dementia or people living with learning disabilities. Maybe this is the one the organizer put our 3 papers together, but all relate to carers, and then also the person, and also relate to support, and then from some perspective also quite long term. I think this is not short term, actually it's quite long term. Care needs. So, and I'm also quite happy and then learning for another 2 speakers a lot. And also thank you for the chair. Thank you.
I just like to say, I'm probably from a little bit of a different background, and just learning and getting a more interdisciplinary view of aging in place has been really helpful for me, and sort of trying to tie in the woodland programs into the wider care of older people, and how it can all be tied together has been really helpful for me. It's been really informative, and thank you so much, and thank you, Agnes, as well for chairing.
I'm sorry, I know I already spoke, but just listening to Yueh-Ching, I remember another thing that maybe connects our 3 speeches very nicely. We were all talking about relatively simple, either intervention or very logical research and results, but they all have, I think, a huge impact. So sometimes these very simple things actually can make a huge change. So maybe that would be another connection to our 3.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you too. Bye.